I'm sorry for being a little bit late. Hope everyone's well. Should quickly look at the questions on YouTube. So we got JP. Hope you're doing well. Your predicted double game week differential top scorer and lowest top own scorer. I think Anthony actually has a pretty good chance of being a top scorer this week. And then lowest top own scorer. I might just predict Rashford. It could be a bad week for him, but I think a lot of us are going to keep him just because anyways, a single game week versus Chelsea is enough to sort of keep him, but it could turn out very poorly. So we'll see what happens there. So I think Stones can cover short points. Honestly, no, I don't think so. So I'm not sure that Stones even plays 2 games, and ultimately Shaw is an insane asset. So the 2 great fixtures as well. Good morning from Prague. Good morning to you, that guy. Absolutely killed me last week with Wilson captaincy. Well done. J Wavy, hope you're doing well. TQ, good luck to you as well this week. Morning, Fran. 2 free transfers. Matoma and Isak to Mahrez and Alvarez. I like those moves, but one thing you need to keep in mind as well is, Matoma, first of all, has a very, very good Southampton game. So I do think it's quite punty because you don't have guarantees in terms of what is City's team going to look like on game week 38. So that is one slight concern that I have. But it's a punt in the right direction, in my opinion, because I think not many people are that high on Isak if he's going to play on the left wing, which I understand. And, of course, Matoma, he could be benched one of these fixtures as well because he's played quite a few games. They have injury issues, and we've seen him rotate regardless. So this could be a time for Matoma to be benched. But yeah, it's a positive move, but I do sometimes think if you think about Game Week 38 as well, 2 free transfers on Game Week 38 is very nice. And the transfers that you're making with 2 free transfers are for some players who might not necessarily play twice, right, with Mahrez and Alvarez. So that's kind of why I feel like if you could just go for 1 move, I'd probably just do that instead, as opposed to 2. So, for example, I think I might prefer like Matoma plus Alvarez and then rolling a transfer for Game Week 38. Artes has got a dilemma. Who would I bench out of Mac 10, Ferguson, Rashford, or Grealish? Honestly, probably one of Rashford or Grealish. I'm going to assume that Mac 10 and Ferguson play that Southampton game, and that alone should allow you to keep that player on. Maybe you could actually bench Grealish, because I'm not really sure if he plays 2 games in a row. Watkins to Alvarez or Rashford to Anthony? Ooh, it's a good question. I think it depends. It depends on what you're going to do with Watkins, right? Are you planning to play Watkins, Sanan? Or are you actually not going to play Watkins? Because if Watkins is on your bench, that's a different situation. Like, let's say if you had Isak or Wilson playing instead of Alvarez, then I would actually probably make the Rashford to Anthony move. However, if you do plan on playing Watkins, then just do the Watkins-Alvarez move. Ryan, how are you? What do you think of Grealish / Isak to Bruno Greenwood -4? Also considering, interesting. I think I like the Bruno move the most. But -4 isn't actually the best either. So sometimes I think potentially just, they're all -4s, obviously, as you've suggested. I think I like Anthony Alvarez the most because I'm really unconfident. Like, let's say out of all four of those players between Anthony Alvarez, Mahrez, Martial, I think I'm least confident in the minutes of Martial. So I'd probably go for Anthony Alvarez. Long night? Absolutely, yeah. I actually generally have sleeping issues, and unfortunately, Saturday, Sunday is when I try to catch up. But there's also a deadline in FPL. Just been quite busy at work, really, to be honest. Arte, sounds good to me. All the best for your season. You too. I don't think I have a chance now to get to top 10 unless I Bruno captain or unless Alvarez does extremely well. But Alvarez seems like he's heavily transferred in, so it's tough this week, I think, to make ground. Hey, Mira, hope you're doing well. Team looks good. I think your team's been looking great, and obviously, even after last week's debacle almost, you've still consolidated extremely well. So all the best to you. Notorious, thank you so much for the donation. Always good to see you, Fran. Could you check Twitter thoughts? Leading mini league with 30 points. What do you think? Absolutely, I can. Yep. I think Rezel, your team actually looks great. I'd probably keep it exactly as it is. I'd still actually play Trippier ahead of Botman on your bench, but I wouldn't touch your team at all. Looks perfectly fine. Because the thing is, for me, if Trippier is injured, I don't really see him as coming on as a late substitute. So I would just put that risk with Trippier starting anyways. Like I'm starting Trippier as well for the same reason. I don't really think he'll be benched personally either. So I'd just put Trippier ahead of Botman on your bench, and I think your team's good to go. And obviously, well done on doing well your mini league. Oh, you actually have 2 free transfers. All right, let's have a look. Interesting. I think what you could do is maybe do kind of like a side grade transfer. So maybe just Isak to Alvarez could be interesting. Because if you go Isak to Alvarez, what you have is the opportunity to just take 2 punts, right, next game week. So if you roll the second transfer this week, probably keep Rashford. Because I think he'll still play the Chelsea game, which is really, really good. Then I would actually just go for that Alvarez punt. I'm not that fond of going Rashford out. Now, alternatively, if you really wanted to strengthen your team, you could maybe, let's say, bench Isak, take Rashford out, go for a United defender or United midfielder, and then another punt. But I do like 2 free transfers on 38, so you kind of have to weigh that up. Plus, you're actually winning your league quite consistently, right? So I would say it's quite easy to play it safe, and then actually there might be more opportunities with deadline leaks on Game Week 38 for you to actually extend your league. So I feel like your team is so strong on this week. I would actually just go Isak to Alvarez and roll. But going back to some of the YouTube questions, thoughts on selling Rashford / Salah to Bruno? I think I'm more a fan of selling Rashford, obviously, because ultimately it seems like Rashford's going to be close to Salah, and I think the issue with going Salah to Bruno is you probably are going to struggle to go back to sorry. So I think if, let's say, you sell Rashford this week, it's probably easier to go back to Rashford next week. Whereas Salah to Bruno, if you actually lose Salah, I think it's very hard to go back to Salah on your team. So that's kind of my query there. I would say it's quite hard. Like I actually had the option to, if you look at my team, to go Salah to Fernandes as well. But that kind of books in a move which is basically going to be something like Fernandes back to Salah next week, or I have to make 2 moves, which I don't even have the budget capacity to. Because if you own Trent, if you own quite a few strong midfield punts, so let's say like a Mahrez, like a Fernandes, etc., those types of players will actually preclude you from actually going to Salah quite easily on 38. So I'm not a huge fan of Salah out. I think Rashford out is better. Would I do Trippier to Shaw? Yeah, I probably would, honestly. As long as it's not a -4, I would do Trippier to Shaw. Thoughts on selling? Yep, sorry. Do you predict higher for Man United CS or high goals scored? I think there's better odds of Man United getting a clean sheet, to be honest, because the person with the highest goal scoring odds for Man United is actually Rashford, but you're not actually. I think you probably wouldn't think that he's going to play 180 minutes this week, so I'm not really going to buy into Man United CS being worse than high goals scored. And then between the actual people who score goals, you're talking Martial, Sancho, Anthony, even Weghorst potentially. Those players are not going to share consistent minutes. So when I think about FPL terms, like maybe the goal scoring ceiling is high, but how is it going to be split? Probably quite evenly between those players. And then Bruno's the one who actually has really, really consistent chances at creating. So it's almost like the expected assists for Bruno versus, let's say, Man United clean sheet. I'm not really sure how you're thinking about this, JP, but yeah, I do generally think that Man United clean sheet's a pretty safe bet as well, considering they also have one home game, and really this Chelsea team's quite lackluster. Would I consider Bruno as a captaincy option? Yeah, absolutely. I don't think I'd probably consider in your situation though, Mira, because I probably would try and consolidate. I think Haaland is actually generally the best captaincy. I'd probably consider my situation, and we'll see what happens for the next 45 minutes of panic in my mind. But I think if I'm, let's say, trying to chase top 10k, I probably would need to chase and go with the Bruno captaincy, to be honest. I'm going Salah to Mahrez instead of Wilson to Alvarez. Yeah, I think keeping Wilson's very, very sensible. So good luck to that. I think I'm going Isaac and Rashi to Alvarez and Anthony. That's a nice pair move. Obviously, we would hope to get some Rashford news before the deadline's actually completely over. I can see Heisenberg's done the he may or may not get news tweet as per usual. Ridiculous, but why can't he just post news when there's actual news? No offense, but if you want to just say that you might have potential news, you might as well not tweet. All right, sorry, going back to the chat. So they switched Isaac for Alvarez. I do like switching Isaac for Alvarez. I'm not sure about Wilson to play safe in your mini league. Yeah, I'd actually probably consider going Wilson. Because most of the people going Alvarez are doing it as a make weight, right? For example, like I've gone for Alvarez because he actually is a little bit cheaper than someone like Wilson. So therefore going for Alvarez actually allows me to afford Fernandes. Now, in fact, because of the Watkins price decrease, I have literally 0.0 in the bank right now. And yeah, I would have missed the move if I didn't make my transfers last night. So that's kind of how tight my budget is right now. Whereas for you, if you actually have the opportunity to go Wilson, I'd probably do that actually. Because I don't have the full guarantees that Alvarez will play, whereas at least Wilson, you're very, very confident that he should play that home game versus Leicester. That's my personal opinion. Henry, what's going on? No City players. No, so Rezul, I think you can definitely go Alvarez, Isaac to Alvarez. So another City player there, and therefore you'd have your 3 City. Good afternoon. I did Captain Wilson last week, but the hit from Mac didn't go well. I mean, I don't think you really cared too much, right? If you actually did Captain Wilson, Nuclear Atoms. So well done there, of course. That's a huge surplus of points. Badger says he's got 2 free transfers, a bench boost, and need to get rid of March. If you could show me your team on Twitter, I'd happily take a look at that. But I think if you're trying to get rid of March, I'd probably think about triple United first, and then maybe triple City before triple Brighton, but it really depends on your budget situation and what your team looks like. But I'd probably focus my transfers there. Mustafa says, I want to get Fernandes, but in return I have to sell Salah or Mahrez. Should I make the move? Honestly, no. I'm not a huge fan of selling Salah. Neither am I a huge fan of selling Mahrez. Thank you. I'll go Alvarez for Isaac then, yep. Makes sense, Rezul. Umero, Isaac and Mitoma to Fernandes and Ciso -4. Well, that's actually a pretty good pair of moves. Yeah, I'd probably do that. Because I think any move that can actually enable you to Fernandes that still keeps your ceiling quite high, that's good. And personally, I think, Fernandes might actually just outscore, let's say, a Mitoma quite easily. And then I think Enciso also outscores Isaac quite easily. Would you do Rashford to Mahrez for a hit? Nope. Who to start? Only one between Rashford, Trippier, and Odegaard. Thanks in advance. I'd probably start Rashford, honestly, still. Worth, Grealish to Rashford, and Havertz, Perez out. Okay, nice. Nice one, Henry. Is that actually a comunicado oficial, or are you just saying that just to say that? Worth, Grealish to Rashford, and Havertz to Alvarez already have Mahrez and Haaland. Ooh, I wouldn't really be doing Grealish to Rashford because I think he is a doubt for the second game, or rather the first game. And then I know you want to go Havertz to Alvarez, but even this week is actually not a bad Havertz week. So just because he doubles, so if he gets appearance points, I think you're good. Nomi says, hi Fran, hope you're doing well. Who do you think is a better option, Mahrez or Anthony? I think they're very close. I think I prefer Anthony, but I wouldn't really be going from Mahrez to Anthony, if that makes sense. Best Liverpool midfielder / attacker for this week and next week other than Salah. I'm starting to actually believe that no one really covers Salah unless you're really going Trent. Because with Gakpo, we've seen him play in the midfield some games. We've also seen him get benched. We've also seen him play this false nine role that I don't think necessarily benefits him too much. Like when the structure was kind of Darwin and Salah, I felt like Gakpo played a bit more of a conclusive role when it comes to expected goal involvement, and he has tapered off lately. Now, that's not to say that Gakpo is not going to do well again, but I'm just really not confident. The pricing as well on those players is really high. So Jota, Gakpo, these players are really, really costly. So I can't see the value of going for a Liverpool attacker this week when you actually have, let's say, punts from City that actually cost the exact same or are cheaper and are better. And the same thing with the forwards too with Alvarez. Mira, cheers for the wisdom, Fran, and agree. I'm not really chasing. Yeah, I honestly think you should maintain your rank because you're in an insane position. So good luck. Start Kepa Raya. I'd probably just start Kepa, right? Because if he gets benched, he gets benched. If he starts, he probably plays 2 games. Thoughts on sending one of them to David De Gea for -4? Nah, I don't think I'm a huge fan of that. Although, honestly, Triple United is quite good. So, yeah, I mean, if you could sell Kepa for David De Gea, that's probably a good move. Sell Trippier for next game week. Yeah, you absolutely could. I don't think I even see myself playing Trippier versus Chelsea next week. The issue, of course, is if you look at my team, I've got Zinchenko, who's a huge issue. So actually what I might be doing next week is going Trippier out because he obviously is worth a bit more money to my team. If I don't play him versus Chelsea, then I simply can just move towards another defender because I'm very, very thin on defenders. What's the deal with the minimum 5 matches played in PL for a medal? Is this including FA and EFL Cups? If so, is Ortega likely to come in for Man City once the title's secured? Ooh, that's actually an interesting point. I'm really not quite sure on that because I think what happens with the Premier League is you still have like a few players that you can actually choose to give the medal, right? Even if you don't play the 5 matches. I think there's like a conditional clause that you don't necessarily need to play 5. But I haven't actually looked into that enough, Roman. So I'm not an official source. Rashford or Grealish to Bruno for a hit? I'd probably go Grealish out, to be honest. Is it worth taking another -4 to take out Kepa or Raya for steal? Yeah, I think so. I think Kepa for steal is actually a pretty good punt. Wilson and Isaac guaranteed to start if fit, and it could be a bloodbath. I feel rolling and keeping either both is potential. No, I think so. So I think rolling is nice. I think what I would say is rolling if you're Bruno Fernandes is a very sensible play, just generally from a logical point of view. But I'm not even sure if you actually have the capacity to actually play both in your team in terms of Wilson and Isaac. If you do, then fair enough. Like just play those players versus Leicester because Leicester are a shambolic defense, and Newcastle still have, let's say, this game worth playing for when it comes to securing top 4. So I think it makes more sense that this Newcastle team goes all out again and just simply wins this fixture at home. Subin says Alvarez and Ciso, Haaland, Salah, McAllister, Mahrez, Fernandes, Shaw, Stupian, Trent, De Gea. Oh, free hit. That's a good team on a free hit. I would say I'd probably consider going for another Man United midfielder like an Antony before I was even thinking about De Gea. Because you could kind of go someone like Steele, for example, and maybe double up on Brighton defense and actually save yourself quite a bit of budget, but actually get some good few attackers in. It's up to you, though, of course, because the Brighton single game clean sheet percentage for Southampton is pretty insane. And then I think with someone like Steele, at least you can get the benefit of getting saves versus Man City. That way you can also kind of punt upwards. Whereas De Gea and Shaw feels like quite template, and it's strong, but I think Antony is also very strong this week as a free hit pick. Best free players to own from every double game week team. I mean, if we're looking at it from a free hit point of view, I would actually say probably Bruno, Shaw, Antony for United, because I'm not confident on Rashford news. I mean, I'll quickly check Twitter as well. I'm just going to quickly look at some Twitter questions as well from some people who've been sending some message requests. So Mark says he's doing Trippier to Kanji and Roll, second transfer for Gameweek 38, or he's doing Trippier to Diaz and Isaac to Greenwood Hmm. I think if you have a second free transfer, I probably would like Isaac Alvarez. And I actually prefer playing Isaac over Trippier, if that's the situation. Otherwise, just bench both. Jordy Lee says, what do you think about Stones at Trippier? I think Stones is better than Trippier anyways, but it's not exactly a move that's worth a free transfer in my opinion, because I think Stones is the City defender who's actually probably most prone to rotation. I'm going to do a captaincy poll too quite quickly, just based on Bruno. Ooh, okay, so you've got a bench boost here, so you need to get rid of March. Interesting. You already have Steele as a keeper, so that's tough, because I think what your team is still missing is actually just a United player. But there's not many United players that are actually cheap, so I would consider maybe Trippier to Shaw. I think Trippier to Shaw and then March to Mac 10 actually makes a lot of sense in your situation. Yeah, that's what I would actually do. And then in terms of leaks, it doesn't seem like we actually have any updates. Yeah. Doesn't seem like there's absolutely anything. Oh well, I think we'll have to just assume that Rashford could play Bournemouth. But more than likely he's going to start versus Chelsea, which is actually extremely strong anyways. It's Rashford at home. It's a diabolical Frank Lampard-led Chelsea team, so that single game week is actually very, very strong for Rashford. Anthony's not a good pick. I mean, you have to think about, he's still probably going to start 2 games, right? That guy, like probably 60 minutes of 2 games. Would you prefer Anthony to Martial? Or would you prefer Martial to Anthony? Because I feel like the issue for a lot of people who are actually going Anthony is that they're going for Anthony because they can't go for Fernandes with one free transfer. So therefore, Anthony is actually within reach. And I don't think Anthony, like for example, if you look at Anthony's underlying stats this season, they're actually very solid. And he hasn't necessarily played enough football to say that there's a good baseline, but I would still prefer Anthony to Martial. And I'd definitely still prefer him to Sancho. Hyper, thanks for your opinion, Thran. Yeah, hope you have a good day as well. Um, Trippier to Shaw for a -4. I don't really like that move. I like Trippier to Shaw for a free transfer, but if it's a -4, I'm not sure I love that move. You could still go for it though, because I think Shaw is actually probably the best defender this week by far. Best free players to own from every double game week team. Sorry, I think I actually did not finish that question. Yeah, so I said the United ones, but that's simply if I was on a free hit. And then if I was to target Brighton, it'd probably still be Matoma, McAllister, or, Estupiñán and Steele, like whatever variation of that. As long as you pick 3 out of 4 from those players, that makes sense. You could obviously also go Ferguson too, if that actually helps with budget flexibility. That's why I think Brighton's the team you would think about the last, because it's worth getting your City assets right. So I think with City, I'd probably actually go Mahrez, Alvarez, and Haaland, because not much faith in defenders. You could go Diaz though. So I would actually prioritize Diaz and Haaland, and then probably actually Mahrez. But once again, it comes down to your team selection. So if you have Fernandes, for example, that also kind of changes things. Nuclear Adam says Foden and Schär out for Bruno and Lindelof. Oh, that's actually a really good pair of moves. I would definitely do the first move. Definitely do the first move. Rossi says, good morning. What are your thoughts on Martial? I think the issue with Martial is that I only think he's going to play 100 minutes of football, something like that. So probably, because one of the issues is even if Martial starts, there's many, many games where he actually gets subbed off early, and then he could also get benched the next game. He could obviously start both, but that's still kind of somewhat a ceiling of 120 minutes. I think he's a good pick if you really need a forward pick and you're really struggling in the midfield position. And let's say if you let's say you already have Mahrez, I wouldn't go from Mahrez to Anthony. That doesn't make sense. So in that situation, I'd probably consider Martial. But I'm not that high on Martial's minutes. start Stones or Matoma. I'd start Matoma. Hope that he actually plays the Southampton game. That's probably better than, Stones playing one of either game. Chris says start Wilson, McAllister, or Trent. I'd probably start Wilson, and then no, I'd start McAllister. Honestly, I'd start McAllister, and then that's so tough though. That's a really, really tough bench conundrum. What makes you actually have to bench one of those players? Oh, are you benching one of them, or are you really just putting two of those on your bench? I think I'd put Trent on the bench, unfortunately, and then I'd probably play McAllister or Wilson. JM says he's almost impossibly got an 80 points to gain on his winning league leader. Any insanity ideas for a free this week? Yeah, so I think you've actually got to go I think you've got to go Fernandes captaincy and just punt it against the wind, because I'm guessing your leader has Fernandes, but not twice. So you probably have to do that. I'd probably go Anthony. I'd probably, So I'd probably go for differentials everywhere. So I'd go Ferguson. I'd probably still go Estupinian. I would probably go McAllister as well. Maybe not have Mitoma, because Mitoma's, I'm assuming he owns him, so higher owned. You don't have Rashford in this situation, but I would still go Shaw, Bruno, and Anthony, something like that. And then defense, I'd probably just go Diaz, because he still isn't high owned. And you now need a third defender, so that's probably Estupinian, as I mentioned. And I think City punts, you can go for Mahrez or Alvarez, and whatever fits your team, you just play them. And just go for full double game weekers. Isaac for Alvarez? Yeah, I do like I like Wilson to protect your league. Thoughts on captaining Bruno? I'm thinking about it. We'll have 30 minutes where I'll be debating the captaincy. I'm going to do a captaincy poll in a few minutes, but we'll see. Trent versus Trippier. I'd play Trent, 100%. It's not even close for me. I would play Trent. Because with the news of the added knock, I think just Trent is just so much more secure. It's a shame Anthony can't. I mean, he's like, are we talking Anthony Martial or are we talking Anthony? Because at the end of the day, Anthony has still scored a few goals and assisted a few in the Prem. Like, I think Anthony, I believe, is actually third on underlying stats in United for anyone who's actually played more than 1,000 minutes. Actually, I think he's second now. He's still underscored what you'd like to see. So he has 3 goals and 2 assists. So pretty poor. But when it comes to his expected numbers, actually, because he's had so few minutes in the team. Sorry, I think he has 4 goals and 2 assists. So he has underscored both XG and XA. But yeah, I mean, I don't think his career has showed that he's like a clinical underperformer. So his NPXG minus G numbers in the Eredivisie were actually consistently okay. So I don't think he's that bad, if we want to be honest there. Because, for example, his XG in Ajax was 7.1 where he scored 8, 6.4 where he scored 4. This is for United, and then 5.3 where he scored 9 actually in the season previous. And then in his last Ajax season, I mean, he scored 1 from 0.4. So that's not huge sample size. You could say that that's Eredivisie attacks as well, but I think he probably hasn't played enough consistent minutes in United, and ultimately as well, he's playing versus 2 very, very easy opponents. So you'd hope it would be easier for him to actually break through in those games. I mean, the alternative is you go for someone like Martial, but I don't even have confidence in him, staying fit, actually getting 2 starts as well. So it's already quite a dire situation. I suppose if you wanted to play slightly more tempo with United, you could just simply go for Lindelof plus Shaw, and then maybe Steele could be your keeper. Or you could obviously just go De Gea plus Shaw and then just go Estupinian if you're worried about that threat. But for people chasing, I think Anthony does make sense as a pick. Also, if you have that sort of situation where you want to go for another midfielder but can't go for Fernandes unless it's a -4. Alrighty, so Anthony's had barely any returns. Yeah, but I think you can't look at that because unfortunately he still hasn't played enough minutes of football. So that's kind of my opinion on Anthony. And also, we're saying barely any returns, but Bruno's had a pretty terrible season when it comes to barely any returns. Also, actually, 60 of you guys in the chat, I'd really appreciate if you guys would like and subscribe. That would be really appreciated. Watkins, yeah, I would definitely go Watkins to Alvarez this week. because Watkins probably costs a bit more money than Isaac. So I would actually go Watkins out. Kepa to De Gea. Yep, that makes absolute sense. Can you imagine Anthony Nunez and Sterling in the same side? Yeah, it's pretty unclinical XI, but at the same time, I feel like we just haven't had enough data on Anthony because he hasn't played enough. As far as Sterling, we have seen him play enough football, so he isn't. For example, Jesus, I'd be more confident that Jesus is a historical, unclinical player, and I don't think that will ever change with Gabriel Jesus. With Nunez, I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. Like, he's had some terrible finishes this year, but that could be worked on. Grealish or Wilson? Definitely Wilson. I'm at 50k. I had one free transfer already and already picked Mahrez in place of Rashford because I believe he has great probability to play both games. Yep, that makes sense. Exactly. I think I would definitely go Mahrez over Rashford. That's a good upgrade. Yusuf says Kepa or Mendy to play. I've got no news on that. Let's actually quickly check if there's any leaks on Kepa though. Wow, apparently Heisenberg is actually saying that Rashford traveled separately. What do you guys think about that? I mean, he says he can't even trust the source though, but he trusts it personally. But he says that we shouldn't take the source as a full guarantee. I mean, that's huge news, but wow. I mean, that still means that Rashford's going to be kind of a doubt, right? Because it doesn't necessarily mean that because he's traveled that he's ready to play. He could still be in a poor state. I think anyone who actually has, like, let's say Brian Kepa this week, you could definitely go for a double game week keeper. But for a single game week keeper, I don't really like that. Mendy was also pretty shocking last week, so I've already seen some Chelsea predictors actually suggest that Kepa will play the next game. You're confident Rashford starts. No, but I think the issue though, that guy, is that it's still. I mean, you're coming from an illness, right? So obviously you need to wait till the final day to actually be sure. The difference with previous situations was that it was based on an injury, right? Last week you also said Rashford was a doubt, and you actually thought that Rashford could start. So I wouldn't necessarily trust you as a source if I had to be brutal. I think you have to kind of just read into what he says, and then every situation is specific. So last week, for example, he was quite honest, and I guessed that Rashford was going to miss out on the game, and that was true. But then when he came back from the international break, he was not really carrying an injury; he was just resting almost. And he said there was a good hope that Rashford would play. This is not the case for this week. Rashford has an illness. Yeah, absolutely. Traveling separately makes sense. I think even Shaw actually historically travels separately. That's the thing. So I think yeah, I'm not 100% certain on the Bournemouth game, but it's more than likely if Rashford's traveled separately that he's going to 100% play the Chelsea game. And at that point, because we don't actually have that many double game weekers, and I don't really like transferring out Rashford for a -4, then I think unless you're going Rashford to Bruno or Rashford to Mahrez, there's not many picks in the midfield that I actually like as a singles transfer. So then you actually have the double transfer Rashford out, which is super tough, and I don't really like that because the single is good versus Chelsea. Thoughts on Trippier to Estupiñán for a -4? Yeah, I'd be okay with it. Like, I'd reluctantly say yes. I'd definitely start Isaac over Trippier because there's already a Trippier doubt. Leicester a terrible defense. I'd still play like Isaac Wilson 100% over Trippier. Is Rashford gonna play? I'm not sure about Bournemouth, but I think Chelsea for sure. And that Chelsea game is going to keep him in my team. Shaw captaincy? No, I don't think so. Not for me. Because you don't know if Shaw could actually move back to left center back for one game. Because let's say, because Varane's coming back from an injury, what you've seen previously is that Erik ten Hag likes to kind of rest players. So by resting players, he might actually rest Varane, which would mean that left center back could be Shaw once again. So for example, we could see, let's say, versus Chelsea, Shaw left center back, maybe Lindelof right center back, maybe Rashford back in left wing. And that could mean Dalot left back. So I'm not sure if I would captain Shaw, because there's still a doubt in my mind there. And then also, is the ceiling that high really for Shaw? Not necessarily, because the clean sheet odds are good for both games, but not fantastic. Bench Isaac or Jota? I'd probably bench Jota. Isaac for Alvarez or Wilson to protect him in mini league. I think Wilson we've asked that. Isaac or Jota to start. I'd probably start Isaac. I think Leicester are so much worse of a defense. Salah to Bruno for a -4. No, absolutely, I would never do that. If it was a free transfer, I would do that, Sam, but not for a -4. Aiden's first in his mini league by 2 points, second as triple captain. He has 5 to 7 double game week. You've got 6 to 7. Is it worth Grealish or Bruno? March to Mac and Isaac to Greenwood for -8. Honestly, I don't mind that -8. I don't mind it, but I think that's going to push it quite closely. But I do like it, actually, because if you can actually separate the double game weekers between the two of you quite a bit, and your move does that, and I think all your moves are positive, right? Grealish to Bruno is huge. March, obviously, I mean, he's not even going to play. And Isaac, in the situation that you put yourself in, you probably would just leave him on the bench, right? As in the Greenwood player. So that's totally fine. I'd probably go for those moves. It's a good way to actually attack your mini league, but also I think because you have that 2-point league and you already have a double game week advantage, extending that to like 9 to 10 is really nice. Kepa and Dalot to David De Gea and Shaw. Yeah, I like those moves. Kepa, Trip, Rashford to Shaw, Bruno. Ooh, that's actually a nice move too. Kepa, Trippier, Rashford to... yeah. So, would you be playing Raya then in that situation, JP? Because I feel like you're kind of hamstringing your team in terms of the keeper, right? Because that means you'll be reliant on Raya for Game Week 38 as well. Is that how that works? Triple captain Haaland, yeah, I think so. If you guys have triple captain, then go for it. I'm going to do a captaincy poll very quickly now, just to see where we all land. I think I'm going to add Mahrez in it, but I can't see many people putting captaincies outside of Mahrez. Maybe Shaw as well. You think Jota's ceiling is higher if he starts? Why do you think that's the case? I think if both of them start, I think Isaac's ceiling is higher, just because Leicester are a much worse defense. Really want to captain Bruno, but also know Haaland is the best captain. Like, let's be honest with ourselves, but you can't. Yeah, I mean it's a tough situation. I would probably go Bruno if I was chasing and I had a lot to chase, but I think if my team is very strong this week, I would not really think about Bruno captaincy. I think I would just Haaland captain. Got 2 free transfers. Would Stones to Shaw and Isaac to Alvarez be useless? No, absolutely not. I think those moves are really good, Finn. But Trippier to Shaw is something that I actually really like a bit more. So I would go for that instead. Is a -4 necessary for this week? No, it's not. So I think you need to also estimate how strong, let's say, it really depends, right? Are you talking about Fernandes this week, Riddles? Grealish to Anthony or Mahrez? I think Grealish to Mahrez makes sense. I'd definitely prioritize Mahrez over Anthony. Yeah, JP, I think I wouldn't kind of hamstring your team for 38, so I'd probably go for the De Gea move. You'd get Mitoma out of my team. Are we talking me specifically, or are we talking someone else? Why don't you do Mahrez for Rashford? I don't have enough money, unfortunately, because Mahrez is a bit too expensive. And I don't have spare free transfers, so my situation is that I've spent 2 free transfers. I took Foden out of my team for Fernandes, and then I took Watkins out of my team for Alvarez. Would I start Eze or Wilson? Ooh, that's a tough question. Probably Wilson, honestly. Rashford to Mahrez, because I think this is still a kind of away fixture for Eze, right? So I still much prefer Wilson at home. Rashford to Mahrez and Kepa to David De Gea for free. Yeah, absolutely. Would do those moves. The transfer you want is -0.1. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, sometimes you could also think about a -4 potentially Kataro for maybe something like Isaac to Greenwood, whatever can actually allow you to budget. So for example, like in my team, I could always go Zinchenko to Patterson. I think I should start Isaac over Mitoma. I don't think so, black screen, because I'm not confident Mitoma will miss. I mean, even if there's no way he plays both games, he's still going to play one game. Whereas with Isaac, I mean, you could see him also get subbed off quite early as well in one of the games. So I'm not sure. I don't think the actual ceiling for Isaac is nearly as high as Mitoma. So if I, let's say, predicted Mitoma to play the Southampton game, then he misses the City game, I think that alone would already keep Mitoma in my team over Isaac, because I think Mitoma versus Southampton probably better than, let's say, Isaac left wing versus Leicester in my mind. So that's kind of how I see it, because Southampton are really shocking. So Leicester are shocking too, but I mean, I have no guarantees that Mitoma will miss Southampton. Do you? One free transfer, Grealish to Mahrez or Wilson to Alvarez, or roll transfer. Topping my league by 33 points. Differentials are Steele. You've got Caparaya, Salah, Grealish, and then Isaac Wilson. Honestly, I actually would probably keep your... I would do Grealish to Mahrez, Jake. I wouldn't really do Wilson to Alvarez. I mean, we can see next week. I'm probably not going to make that bet black screen, but I know you're very confident in it. So I think it makes sense to act on that in your team. I'm probably still going to keep Mitoma if I'm being honest. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. Hopefully Mitoma otherwise would Hull versus City, but we can obviously have a look at that in Gameweek 38 together, and we'll have a laugh. Or you could laugh at me, or I could just laugh at you potentially. We'll see what happens. I don't know. I just think I don't have the same confidence in you over Mitoma missing out on Southampton. That's all. If I had Wilson, would I start him instead of Mitoma? Yeah, I probably would, actually. I probably would. 20 points behind my mini league leader. My differentials with them are Fernandes. I think Fernandes and Alvarez is owning them is good enough. Yeah, I do think so. Because I think Fernandes actually probably has an expected point value of something like 12 this week. And, you know, he could outscore that, and easily that could be your gap. David says Grealish to Bruno or Watkins to... oh, definitely Grealish to Bruno. I think Grealish to Bruno is good enough with 38 in mind to hopefully let's say catch a 20-point gap. I'm not sure Watkins to Alvarez is the one that would do it. Who's your best 2-week differential punt? That's a good question. I am generally quite high on, I think, Mahrez, but I think he's too risky, he's too volatile. So probably Anthony, because I think I can see 3 starts for him. But the issue is I think Bruno is just that much better. I would love to go Eze in Gameweek 38 for one of my Brighton players, maybe, or even go for a defender, but 2 Gameweek punts. Hard to say, because I feel like a lot of the City players, like, you're just plugging a hole for Gameweek 37 because you're just punting on the double fixture. But then on 38, I'm actually not sure if I would definitely play Alvarez in my team. So, 2-week punt. Maybe Ferguson from Brighton could be interesting, but I'm not really that high on it. Please answer this. Ederson in for Caparaya. I'm not sure about Ederson in, because I do think he could be rotated. So I would definitely prioritize Steele or De Gea first. I know when they beat Wolves 6-0 a few weeks ago, he missed the game, but what is the kind of point of that argument, if that makes sense? Are we saying that, like, De Zerbi's going to realize that he was wrong to play Mitoma all these games? I don't know if Gakpo is going to start both games, though. And I think Gakpo has played center mid in some games, so I think he's very, very expensive too. So I'm not sure if I like Gakpo. Maybe actually Saka could make sense. But also, yeah, am I really that confident in an Arsenal player? I mean, Saka Odegaard could be sensible. Maybe Trossard, actually. Trossard could be a good punt. I think Trossard's interesting. Hey, Mal. Hope you're doing well. I'll quickly check your Twitter. Have you sent it on notifications? Okay, yep, got you. Yeah, Martinelli to Mahrez makes absolute sense. I would probably do that move. I mean, so the issue with your team, I guess, is that you don't really have too many United players for whatever reason. I would actually think about a hit, to be honest. Do you have the potential to maybe... I mean, do you have a true free transfer situation here, or are we talking... Because I feel like Watkins is quite a problem point in your team. Martinelli is a problem point in your team. And then lack of United is a problem point in your team. So I think Shaw Bruno immediately spring to mind. So I think if you took a fat like set of hits, I actually quite like Alvarez, Shaw, Bruno, if you can afford that. I'm not sure if you can. Let me know if you can though. Like, is there a way you could do that? Maybe Trippier to Shaw, maybe Watkins to Alvarez, and then let's say Martinelli to Bruno. Is that something you can do? I'd still probably make that -8. Otherwise, if you wanted to go for a -4, I'd probably go Trippier to Shaw, and then go Martinelli to Mahrez. I still like Trippier to Shaw -4 because I feel like there's a strong lack of United in your team. You've got 0 United, so I think that's a very tricky position. Martial for captain. I think that's cap, my friend. I don't think I would do it, Carlos. Sorry. I think that's too much. And Ciso as well. I think I prefer him to Ferguson. I think Ciso might play more minutes, black screen, because he can actually play right wing and striker. Or not really striker, but obviously the 10 spot. But Ferguson, I do think, is obviously just a naturally better goal scorer as well. And since you're already plugged into the forward position, you're just looking for goals. So maybe Ferguson is interesting. 27 points off 100k, Fernandes captain. If you really want to try, I think, yeah, 27 points, that's quite a bit to chase. You probably have to punt. So, yeah, I would go Fernandes captain. One dilemma only. To start Trippier or Isaac? I'd start Isaac and then Trippier. That's how I would play it on my team. Bench order Kiwi or Watkins Totti. Yeah, I think that's correct. How would you order the bench? Yeah, I think you've done it right, Nobs, yeah. Kieran, I really don't like Ederson this week because I think he could get rotated. So yeah, I'm not sure if I love Ederson. Not only that, but then like if you let's say go Ederson in, he misses one game, and then he could also miss 38. Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about that one. Why does nobody want Grealish? I think the thing with Grealish is if you look at underlying stats, he's the worst City player when it comes to underlying stats. So even though he looks very good on the ball, and clearly he's the first choice City left wing, from an FPL point of view, Grealish doesn't really correlate well to FPL. So I think Rob, I've got to go Lindelof because I think Varane coming back from an injury will get rotated. But sorry, just back to the question. Yeah, Grealish, I don't think he will necessarily play the Brighton game as a starting left wing. So that already calls into question minutes. Grealish is only a good pick if you're confident he'll play the games. Whereas I'm not confident he'll play 2 out of 2. So if he plays 1 out of 2 as a starter, then Grealish is already one of the worst assets from a City perspective because he has some of the worst underlying stats. So, for example, Foden, I believe, is second in City in terms of actual goals and assists conversion, and then Mahrez at least has much better expected goal involvement than Grealish. Per Kieran, I mean, go Ederson in, but I'm not sure if it's that good of a move. That's just my honest opinion because I think Ederson could be rotated. Stephen, maybe too much overthinking, but taking a -4 from Solanke to Alvarez. No, I think that is the way to go. I like Fergie as well, but Enciso looks so good when I see him play, and Welbeck, Undav. No, that's true actually. I mean, Undav actually, like Welbeck looked like I think Welbeck was kind of playing like right wing last match, right? That looked pretty horrific. So I don't think that will be revisited again because he did absolutely nothing in that game. Whereas Undav still, whether as a 10 or a striker, still looked okay. Should I do Mahrez and excuse me, sorry. Should I do Mahrez and Alvarez in for Isaac and Matoma? Yeah, I would do that, Josh. JT says Isaac to Enciso / Ferguson and Matoma to Mahrez. Yep, I would do those moves. Isaac to Alvarez for a -4. I probably wouldn't do that if I'm being honest, because I'm not confident that Alvarez plays for Chelsea, so I wouldn't do that. Just quickly checking. Checking graphics. There's no news. No updated news on Rashford. No other crazy news so far. Just quickly checking Twitter. Yeah. Sadly, I'm just looking at leaks. There's absolutely nothing. And I can't see anyone suggesting anything differently on Rashford. Our only source is really Heisenberg. So, yeah. Yeah. I think I'd probably keep Rashford in that situation for a lot of managers. I wouldn't really think about transferring Rashford out. The only punt I can really see this week is Bruno captaincy if you're chasing by a lot of points. But I personally wouldn't do it, and I'm not doing it myself. So, because I feel like I can still probably squeeze into the top 10k, and that's probably going to be my goal now, whether I make it or not. And ultimately, I still think Haaland's the better captain, but there is still going to be a world where Haaland could totally blank, let's say Chelsea, and then maybe not actually get a start versus Brighton because they would have won the league anyways. And on that situation, it would actually make a lot of sense to get absolutely destroyed by Bruno captaincy. And Bruno hasn't had many penalties this season. Maybe he gets penalties this week. Maybe something crazy happens like that. So that could help out. But for now, I think, yeah, Bruno captaincy only really makes sense if you're chasing by quite a fair margin. Bruno will get 20 points. I think that's probably optimistic. I think 12 points is a good estimate for Bruno. Same with Haaland as well, as a minimum. Start Rashford or Isaac. I'd definitely start Rashford. I would start Rashford, 100%. Worth getting rid of De Bruyne? Probably. For De Bruyne, like De Bruyne to Fernandes makes sense. Yeah. KDB to Mahrez and Burn to Shaw, Trippier to Shaw, or Stones to Shaw. I like Trippier to Shaw the most. Oh, wait, sorry. KDB to Mahrez and Burn to Shaw probably is actually quite interesting because, yeah, maybe KDB is the one that gets the most amount of rest. But I'm also not that confident that Trippier to Shaw is nice. You already have Fernandes. Is it worth changing De Bruyne to Salah? No. I wouldn't change De Bruyne to Salah. Neither would I change Salah to De Bruyne. But I would probably think about De Bruyne to Salah next week, Hamish. So that's what I would probably do. But thank you guys so much for watching. Make your deadline moves. You only got 2 minutes left. I'm going to keep my team as it is. Let's just quickly have a look. Yep, just double checking if I didn't accidentally captain Fernandes. So yeah, I think my team is going to stay exactly as it is. I don't think I can. I just don't think I can bring myself to go against Haaland captaincy. Tough situation. Let me just remind myself of some of the underlying stats. Yeah, I mean Bruno is he's just got so little goal threat compared to Haaland. Like it's not even close. I mean, obviously these are per 90 stats, but still. I mean, I don't think I could live in that world. I really don't think I can. So, Mal, thank you so much. -8 worth it if I go Watkins, Martinelli, and Trippier out for Alvarez, Bruno, and Shaw. I think so, Mal, 100%. That actually would be a move that I would 100% endorse because these United fixtures are so good, and like you could obviously argue that, let's say, going Shaw feels like you're covering the template, but really in this situation, I think Shaw is the best defender this week. Fernandes is the best midfielder this week, and Alvarez is arguably still an upgrade for Watkins, right? So I really like those moves. United aren't scoring. I mean, let's be honest here. I mean, United aren't a joke of a team. And frankly, Bournemouth and are already safe from relegation, and Chelsea, I mean, I've already roasted Frank Lampard enough. It's not a close captain choice. Yeah, no, I think it's Holland. Accidentally bench Shaw. Well, unbent. Are you serious? Oh God. All right. Good luck, Mal. I accidentally captain Shaw. Are you sure what you accident? Are you sure what you actually accidentally did? I don't think I've accidentally done anything. This is why you should never touch your team 1 hour from the deadline, unless there's news. That was kind of a streaming sort of rule that I set up for myself. Although I did actually lose 3 points lately by rotating my bench with Fernandes on game week. Whatever the match was for Spurs actually was the one that I did it quite silly, but accidentally sold Shaw. Rashford out in the first match, 2 penalties. Bruno the taker. Yeah, thanks you guys. Thank you guys so much for watching the stream. I really appreciate you guys. We'll probably catch up with you guys next week. Hopefully you guys do well. Hopefully this, I mean, for the people who Captain Wilson, obviously well done in that situation. But I guess hopefully we don't have to suffer too much by Wilson this week if you don't own Wilson and you're not in that camp. And hopefully Fernandes actually turns out well as a transfer. And I really need Foden to kind of keep it quiet so I don't have existential depression overtake him out. I like United, but they aren't scoring goals at the moment, and Bournemouth is a hard fixture. They've been playing well for a while. I agree, but when we say that they're not scoring goals, they're still definitely scoring goals. They're just not scoring as much goals as they should. So sometimes, when you're actually creating those many chances, right, from an underlying point of view, it's going to come home to roost eventually. And I'm not that confident in Chelsea, particularly Chelsea away, right? So that's a good avenue, hopefully, for some holes to come from United. And worst case as well, I mean, United still have an airtight defense. And we've seen also someone like Fernandes, he can get into bonus without doing much really on the field. So he's a good pick almost always. But yeah, hope you guys have a wonderful week and see you guys shortly.